now we are so excited to be joined with our next guest, Adam Mockler. Adam is a content creator. He is part of the fast growing and influential Midas Touch network online. And Adam, it's also, I hear, your birthday today. So happy birthday. And thank you so much for joining us on Closing Strong.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat. We are 30 something days out from the election and it's high stakes. It is high stakes. So, yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
It is very high stakes. And there was the VP debate this week, also, we want to chat about. But before we get into that, I know our audience is really curious about this. Obviously, content creators are playing a really outsized role in this election, the biggest role they've ever played. From my experience in any election in our history, and in general, just in marketing and advertising and communications and news and media consumption. And folks don't know so much about it. And it's like a very fast growing and changing industry, and it's all about the individual. And so I have a million questions for you as a creator. How did you find yourself in this position? How did you become a content creator with over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it happened really quickly, but it also happened over the span of a decade in a way. So the YouTube channel that I post on every single day, I started that YouTube channel when I was 7 years old, and I was posting Minecraft videos every single day, just like dumb video game stuff. But in the process of doing that, I learned how to edit really quickly and really efficiently. And then also, I was really involved in politics. I grew up in Indiana. And I was one of the only liberals in my school. I mean, there were other liberal people, but oftentimes I'd find myself talking to Republicans or their parents, my friends' parents who are Republicans. So with this YouTube channel that I had and these skills that I had built, and then the skills that I built in conversation, like for example, in fifth grade, I remember getting kicked out of my classroom because I was arguing with my teacher about gay marriage. And he was super Christian. He said that gay people choose to be gay and they shouldn't be able to choose to get married. And we argued about it. I got kicked out of the classroom, sent to the principal's office.
We have something in common. I got asked not to return to my Catholic high school for writing a pro choice essay in religion class.
That is hilarious.
I'm so happy to hear that story.
I'm sure that planted the seeds for how you ended up in your position too, because you like to push back.
We are who we are.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the broader point is when I graduated high school, I stopped doing YouTube in high school because I wanted to actually get girls and stuff. But when I graduated high school, I started YouTube again and I was like, I bet I can combine my skills in talking politics, my skills in video editing into one cohesive series. And then I went to a Trump rally, and the way it happened was wild. And the main takeaway from the story I'm about to tell is you got to execute on your ideas. Because I had this idea for a while, and there was a Trump rally coming up 6 or 7 hours away, but it was 2 days from, let's say, like the day that I wanted to do it. So I emailed a bunch of cameramen in the area, a bunch of local cameramen. One dude hit me back and said, this is my only free Saturday for the next few months. Let's make it happen. We made it happen and went so viral. And now a year and a half later, this dude's like my best friend and we're hitting another Trump rally soon. So yeah, it all just fell into place within the past year. And then I got hired by Occupy Democrats, then Midas Touch. But as fast as it happened, it also, like, there's the whole phrase, like, the average overnight success takes 5 years. And I don't want to say I'm like the overnight success, but I have been doing this stuff for like over a decade. So with that in that context in mind, you can kind of see how I am where I am.
That is wild. But I also love that it isn't accidental at all. You really had a design around this and you had the experience and the grit to do it. It's really cool.
I'm like an industry plant, the way it all happened so perfectly.
Tell us actually about that very first Trump rally and the video that went viral and really kind of, affirmed your suspicions that this could really hit a nerve with people.
Oh yeah, I remember being pretty nervous before it. That is absolutely natural. I'll remember that whole day vividly for the rest of my life. I sat down with my cameraman that I just met. We had breakfast and we talked about strategy. And I said, I think there's something like viral here. And then the first interaction we had, the lady began defending slavery. And she starts talking about the Civil War and, like some slave owners were humanistic. And then the next lady we talked to starts talking about the white hats and how Trump is really still the president controlling Biden. But then Biden is at fault for inflation and the wars. But then Trump is at fault for all the good stuff. Mind blowing stuff. Boom, instant virality. And then off that, I really got better at being in the field too. So if you look at my newer MAGA rally stuff, I'm really good at breaking through to them and like inching them over to my position. And I think it's a really iterative process because you get used to their talking points, you figure out how to maneuver around them.
Yeah, and I think that there's a great fascination in the country for people who are not Trump supporters about Trump supporters, right? You hear all the time people say, I can't understand how you can support someone who has this many felony charges or has done X, Y, Z. And you're really kind of bringing out some of the humanity in them in this conversations, and that fascination has to be part of what does hit the nerve in terms of the viewership.
So how do you plan? I'm just interested about how you decide what you're going to do. So, for example, we've got 30 plus days left in the election. How are you thinking ahead about what you're going to do over this period? And then decide how you're going to dive in and go and execute some of your ideas.
Yeah, so I've been thinking actually a lot farther out in the future. Like I've only been thinking about 2028 and what I'm going to do in between this election cycle because I'm in such a good groove right now that it's all almost autopilot. So I wake up every day, I make 4 to 5 different videos. And then today, for example, I scheduled a few flights to a Trump rally and we're just trying to knock out as much content we can in as little of a time as possible.
The volume is really important, right? In terms of keeping your subscriber base engaged and working with the algorithm. Talk a little bit about actually how it works on YouTube to be able to kind of get in front of more folks.
Yeah, I honestly think the Midas Touch output is unparalleled. I mean, they post like 15 videos a day. My channel is usually 6 to 7 videos a day. Sometimes it's 3 or 4, but that's all me just posting, editing, researching. It's a game. It's a game that you sometimes have to play. I'll always remember when I first started YouTube, I told my friends I never ever want to clickbait or do any of that type of stuff. But now my entire channel has turned into that because that is how you remain competitive in the algorithm. And everybody sort of says the same phrase, like nobody wants to be clickbaiting or using these yellow arrows, but I have 2 options. Either I stop doing it, my viewership drops to a fraction of what it is, and then I lose my ability to have an impact, or I remain competitive in a highly competitive field because it is a competition. Look at it like this. Like when you're in a grocery store and you're walking past and you see 4 different types of cereal, they try to make it visually appealing. So you pick that different type of cereal. It's the same thing as when people are scrolling through the algorithm. They're going to click on the video that is most appealing. So you're directly competing with other people who want to grab views. And then it turns into this like, who can hit the bottom the fastest and just keep clickbaiting. But we're in a pretty good cycle right now. I'm in a pretty good spot to just very broadly between this election cycle and next election cycle. We're trying to change the digital media space in a post Trump era, is what I'm trying to say. So right now, if it's clickbaity or stuff like that, we're trying to pivot from that and really do more on the ground stuff like that. Yeah.
You just noted exactly why there will be a yellow arrow in the thumbnail for this interview.
It's
Closing
important, like between being able to do this full time and being able to have an impact or not doing yellow arrows. I mean, yeah, we're going to do the clickbait. And it seems like most people make that decision. I even see like big networks now sometimes using yellow text. And it's like, yeah.
it is the color.
What do you think has been most surprising about this journey you've been on? I mean, when you look back on it, I mean, what's been the thing that kind of was like, oh my God, I can't really believe this has really happened that way that you didn't anticipate?
How well my vision mapped onto reality when all you have to do is execute. So, like, I read a book a few days before my first ever Trump rally, and this all sounds like too good to be true, but I read this book and it was like the difference between most people is like everyone has these great ideas, but nobody actually executes on them. So, that is what I decided to do because I was thinking about this Trump rally idea for a year and then I executed on it. And then it all happened very perfectly where I was picked up by Occupy Democrats, picked up by Midas Touch, and now I'm working towards a broader vision, which I've touched upon a few times. In between election cycles, I really want to legitimize this sphere with on the ground journalism, with really breaking news stories like that are unparalleled in other spheres. And I think it's totally possible. And I'm hoping that my vision can continue to map onto reality as it has. But yeah, my most surprising is that and also how close the election is. I struggle to understand it, but at the same time, I understand it very well because I've talked to these people. And a lot of times they're low information voters.
I want to talk about the stakes of this election and one group of voters in particular that has made a lot of headlines this cycle, far more so than usual in all the years I have worked in politics, certainly, and that is young men of all races, especially Gen Z men. There is a bigger, more stark gender divide in the polls and in other kind of metrics of engagement, where we're seeing far more men and especially younger men move to the right and far more women, including formerly kind of disengaged women move to the left. I think our strong hypothesis there is pretty clear that it's related to Dobbs and the issue of reproductive rights in healthcare. But I'm curious, how much do you know about your audience, and in terms of actually as a young male who, as you self-described, is liberal, how do you think about communicating to and bringing more young men like you along with your content?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. So my audience is pretty evenly divided between younger people who watch me because I'm just like a chill Gen Zer, and then older people who have migrated from MSNBC in the traditional media over to the sphere for Midas Touch. And I honestly think that Mark Cuban going on Theo Vaughn is the exact model. Let me tell you a personal anecdote. I'm in a group chat with a bunch of my friends from high school. Like I said, I grew up in Indiana. I graduated high school in 2021, so it's a few years back. So I'm still friends. I'm still close with people who are Trump supporters and vote red. And my audience is always like, Adam, why don't you ditch those friends? Which is just weird. Like I've known these people for years. I'm not that far removed from high school. But either way, we talk in this group chat about politics all the time. They're kind of right leaning, but they're right leaning in the sense that their parents are. They don't know anything about politics, and I can move them over on any issue, whether it's climate change or gay marriage. They agree with me on everything. And one of my friends said that watching Mark Cuban on Theo Vaughn's podcast changed the way he looks at politics and looks at Donald Trump, and he has a new understanding. So I think that Democrats need to be putting these interlocutors in the limelight more. I think that Tim Walz needs to go on Theo Vaughn. Tim Walz needs to go on like Howard Stern, or not even like a Joe Rogan, because I think that Tim Walz on a Joe Rogan is like what we need to be aiming for, but not Joe Rogan himself, because he's a little bit too far out there sometimes. But you get the model I'm going for. Enter this brosphere, have Kamala Harris on Hot Ones, tap into these important cultural events and show people that, hey, like Democrats are cool. Because I think a lot of people right now think Democrats are super uptight. Maybe they're not like chill, but they are very cool people.
That's where I was going to actually dig a little, like a layer deeper on this, right? Like
Yeah.
you said that your right-leaning friends agree with you on most issues, like climate change and reproductive rights, et cetera. What do you think? Do you think it's the cultural disconnect and the coolness, as you mentioned, or is it related to business and the economy? Like, why do you think Mark Cuban is such a good messenger and sort of gateway for some of these guys that don't see themselves as part of the Democratic Party?
I think it's a messaging problem on the Democrats' behalf, because I went into all this, my whole political thing, with the idea that most Americans fundamentally agree with liberal issues if you don't even use liberal wording. This is Tim Walz's thing, but I've been saying this for a while too. When you go in for a surgery or some sort of trans checkup to see if you have gender dysphoria, these decisions should be kept between the parent, the child, and the doctor. The government shouldn't be stepping in. That is a liberal idea right there that conservatives agree with. Also, the idea that we should be funding Ukraine and protecting the interest of our allies, and also stopping Russia in its tracks. These are ideas that conservatives could get behind. So when you explain all of these ideas in a little bit of different wording, you wrap it in some conservative rhetoric, they agree with it. So my broader point is, I think that it's a messaging problem with Democrats, where they need to go out there and they need to meet people where they're at. Pete Buttigieg is really good at doing this. And he actually talks about the importance of going on Fox News. A lot of times it's not these people's fault that they're not getting the right information. Like, yeah, they could seek it out, but they're being lied to by the Tucker Carlsons of the world. I went to a Trump rally a few months back, and this lady told me that all she needs, her main concern this election, is getting health care for her autistic son. He needs therapy, and she can't afford health care. And I said, do you think the government should be able to step in and provide like a safety net for people like you? She's like, of course, I just need a little bit of help. And I was like, what if I said the Democrats are providing that or offering that? She's like, no, that's communism. So like these people don't understand that liberalism is actually amazing. It's a great word. And I think the Democrats need to get out there. That's why part of my goal, again, I keep going in between election cycles. I want to get out there in the media circuit. I want to show people that liberalism can be cool. People think that it's all purple-haired college kids, but it's not. It's normal people.
So speaking of liberalism being cool, what was your take on the VP debate this week?
Debating is a skill that does not reflect on leadership, is what I'll say. So when I was watching them on stage, Tim Walz objectively looks like a better leader through and through. He showed all of the characteristics of leadership, but I do think JD Vance has a better grasp on debating in particular. I debate a lot on panels and at Trump rallies, so I'm not going to lie and say that Tim Walz is some debate lord who went for the jugular. I think that JD Vance seemed more slick and lawyer-like. He lied with everything he said. I don't even have to, this shouldn't even need to be said, but I disagree with everything that JD Vance says. But I do think he was slick on stage, The moment where Tim Walz asks him, did Trump lose the 2020 election? I think that needs to be replayed over and over. That is a defining moment because it's just absolutely disgusting that these people are still undermining our elections. But my main takeaway is that JD Vance is a slick opportunist who doesn't really have any guiding principles other than grab power. And Tim Walz is a normal dude who is very likable and a great leader.
It's exactly right. And I think one of the silver linings of that debate is that actually a lot of the people who are either undecided or not planning to vote already were not watching the debate live. But
Yep.
if you do see clips of it, but then you see clips of Vance on any of the right wing podcasts that he does all the time, it's a different person. He's like a chameleon, right?
He's awkward. Yeah.
He plays the role that he needs to play. Like he played a compassionate person in parts of the debate last night. And then we've heard him say the least compassionate and empathetic things and just really egregious things about women in other formats. So my, big takeaway that I hope other folks have is that when you see those different versions of him, how can you trust him? Tim Walz is who he is everywhere he goes.
JD Vance is sane washing the entire MAGA universe. So, I mean, my audience got mad when I said that JD Vance was actually doing decently on stage because I think that he was well spoken, but what he was saying was absolute BS because he was legitimizing Donald Trump's authoritarian beliefs with more slick rhetoric. So it's interesting because JD Vance is trying to tap more into this world of young men who are already, I don't like to be the dude that throws around the word misogyny all the time, like, oh, you're misogynistic. I think that loses voters. But I have seen a lot of my friends in this group chat say, like, oh, VP Harris is just annoying. There's something annoying about the way she speaks. That is absolutely misogyny. That is absolutely misogyny, like the definition of misogyny. So yeah, I think that JD Vance appeals to people who just want to be like a bro.
Adam, let me ask you a question. For older politicians, older Democrats who are trying to navigate both the legacy media and the new media that you're part of, what advice do you have for them in terms of how they can look at what you're doing, learn from it, and how it may affect their comms and their strategies going forward?
Yeah, have a diversity of sources. I think that if you're only watching traditional media, you're probably missing a lot of stuff on the outer edges of what's going on. And traditional media does both sides stuff a lot. I know it's kind of a meme at this point, but CNN does really both sides stuff a lot of times. And so does the New York Times when they shouldn't. But also, if you're only consuming alternative media, people also fall into this rabbit hole where they believe stuff too easily. I see it in my fan base too. After Trump was almost assassinated for the first time, I went live, and a lot of them were fighting me about whether or not that was a blood packet on his ear or whether or not it was all fake. And I was trying to keep them in check. Like, hey, let's just go with what the Associated Press says. Let's go with what all of these independent organizations say. So there has to be a balance where you can't go full Alex Jones and just be trusting what independent media says. But also, if you're only consuming traditional media, again, you're missing a lot on the edges. So since I'm in alternative media or like this new media space, I'd say consume about 70% of us and then fact check it with AP News at the end of the day. That's what I do. I watch a lot of digital media, but then I'm always reading AP and BBC articles because they have people on the ground confirming stuff.
Too much of any one thing is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
I am curious. There are a lot of male content creators on the right, and that kind of Pullman over to the right. You mentioned Joe Rogan, but also folks like Charlie Kirk and Dan Bongino and all of the ones, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, who are actually getting paid by Russia, et cetera. I'm really curious, do you actually spend time watching, consuming their content to kind of understand the other side of sort of this sphere of media and influence for an audience of younger men?
That is a great question. And yes, I love it. I had an obsession with listening to Charlie Kirk's podcast for a while, obviously, because I disagree with everything he says. But as somebody who goes out into the field and talks to MAGA, it's like seeing the source of where these talking points come from almost. So I'm interacting with these talking points, like a watered down version of them. But then when I listen to Charlie Kirk, I have a way better understanding of the MAGA world. So don't mistake it and think I'm enjoying Charlie Kirk because of what he's saying. I'm enjoying it because I have a way deeper understanding of where all of these people are coming from. And like, as much as I hate Charlie Kirk, he can explain what the deep state means to him more so than most MAGA supporters. So when I know Charlie Kirk's understanding of the deep state and I have a full understanding of it, it's a lot easier for me to punch back at MAGA rallies,
I consume a lot of right-wing media. I know exactly.
It's like a guilty pleasure at some point, right? It's pretty good stuff.
But you have to know what they're saying. Like you said, it makes you better at your job too.
Yeah.
Listen, I did thousands of appearances on Fox News over 17 years, and it was incredibly important to my understanding of current politics. I feel lucky. I mean, it was hard and it was adversarial and difficult, but it also helped me come to a much greater understanding of them and where, they're trying to take the country. So I agree with you. Listen, man, you've done amazing things. We're all really proud of you. Let us know how we can help you in your journey in any way. I know we're running out of time. Tara, if you've got any final thoughts.
Just my last question is, I just want to understand, do you have a hand on the pulse of kind of what percentage of your audience you think are going to vote, especially the younger folks that follow you? And are you doing anything to encourage them to participate along with all of the great content you're producing?
Yeah, definitely. I talk about it every video. I drop vote.org and I say that even voting isn't enough. There's so many ways to have your voice heard. You can canvass, you can phone bank. It's really smart to make sure your friends and family have a way to get to the voting booth on November 5th. Make sure that they're registered, make sure that they have a way to get there, whether it's you giving them a car ride or finding them an Uber, some way. Get people to vote, mobilize people. Yeah, I think that when it comes to what percent of my audience is going to vote, basically everybody. Like, I doubt there's somebody watching me rag on Trump all day that isn't already registered unless they live in another country. As far as the younger people, it's kind of hard. A lot of them will mobilize. It's hard to tell because when I scroll through Twitter, there's an outsized voice where people are like, oh, F the establishment. We're not going to vote for either party. But then when I talk to people in real life, most Gen Zers are pretty liberal, like I said, and most of them do seem to understand what's at stake. So when I talk to Gen Zers in my audience, they all seem fired up and ready to vote. So sometimes Twitter can be misleading when you see all these Gen Zers saying like, oh, we're going to abstain totally. It's not always like that.
That's my deep hope, that there is a very large, brewing, quiet voter segment, especially around young people this time around.
I'm getting nervous about the election. I'm not going to lie, though. With 30 days to go, I'm getting nervous.
Oh, yeah. Clear eyes, do the work every single day, right? That's the job for all of us. So really grateful for the work that you're doing and the model that you're showing, hoping other young people take your steer. You can't get anything done if you don't execute on your vision. It sounds simple, but it is hard. It is important. It's true. And really glad and excited that you executed on yours and that it's playing a role in this critical election. So Adam, thank you so much for joining us. And happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Adam.
Thank you for having me on. And let's absolutely do this again, not only soon, but let's make it a recurring thing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would be great.
Thanks, Adam.